everyone that this is an official Transportation Committee hearing. It is being recorded and it is being streamed live, so everything that we do from here on out is public. Today's date is Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. This is a Transportation Committee Policy and Finance hearing, and we have one bill on our agenda today, which is Senate File 3255. Before we get started on it, I just wanted to walk through some of the procedures in hopes that it will help make this hearing run smoothly and help us comply with the various rules and regulations that we have to abide by when utilizing virtual hearings. First of all, I think I announced that we do have a quorum, and that is, of course, necessary. I'm going to try and run the committee in the same fashion that we would run a committee if we were handling it in person, albeit there is going to have to be some modification. We have staff on board, Mr. Kalusa, the committee administrator, and Mr. Zender, the CLA. They are going to help keep track of things administratively like votes and when members want to speak. We also have on with us our nonpartisan staff, Ms. Boyd and Ms. Stengel. And of course, at any time that you wish to address a question to either one of those, feel free to do that. Any members who have their cameras off, I would ask that you turn them on so that we can visually see that you are here. And I guess there is a rule that says if you are participating in the hearing, i.e. speaking, making a motion, voting, i.e. your cameras have to be on. When you are not, in fact, participating, at that point, you can turn them off. I would ask that unless you are speaking, that you mute yourself. And in the lower left-hand corner, if you haven't done this before, you will see a little red microphone to mute and unmute. If you go up, I think it's the upper right-hand corner, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, upper right-hand corner, you will see mute and unmute. That's where you click the button so that we don't have the feedback coming at us. When you wish to speak, you can unmute yourself, and you will be recognized, and then feel free to speak. When you are done speaking, then if you would go back on mute. The way to be recognized, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's a button there that says participants. And if you click on that, you will see a spot where you can raise a hand. And that is one way to be recognized. The other way to be recognized that we'll try and work with you is just wave your hand in front of the camera. It's kind of low tech, I guess, but Mr. Kalusa or Mr. Zender will spot you and put you on the list. As far as amendments are concerned, if you wish to offer an amendment, we will have to take a pause while number one, the amendment is emailed out to each of the members so that we can see what the amendment is, and staff will also take that time in order to post the amendment. Once all of the amendment or all of the members have got the amendment and it is posted, we will then at that time take up the amendment. Regarding voting, we'll try and do it much the same we do as when we're in person. When there is a voice vote, you will be told that, we're coming up to a vote, get ready. And at that point, you'd have to unmute yourself. And we would then call for the vote in the same manner that we always do. But I would also, in addition, if you would just give a thumbs up on your screen, that would maybe help staff keep track of the fact that you have in fact voted. In the event that there is a doubt on the passage of something and you wish to have a division, please indicate that, and we will proceed with recognizing a division just like we do in any other type of a vote. And insofar as roll call is concerned, you of course have the right to roll call a vote, but as is normally done, you would ask for that roll call vote before voting is commenced, just like in a normal committee hearing. For the purposes of the actual hearing today, I am going to metaphorically pass the gavel to Senator Jasinski, and he will chair the meeting while I present the bill that is up before us. After the bill has been resolved, then I would take the gavel back, and I'm going to have a couple of closing comments. Regarding testifiers, other than Mr. Radin, we don't have any testifiers that have signed up for today. And Mr. Radin is here to ask questions. If he wishes to speak, of course, he would be recognized. But he is at this point signed up to testify in response to questions. With that, Mr. Kalusa, do you feel I have missed any procedural statements that we should maybe bring up for members? I tried to cover them, but
no, just a reminder to members that when we do vote, we would ask that you turn your cameras on, and for those that haven't done so already, if they could turn their cameras on so me and Mr. Zender can mark them as present.
I'm going to wait just a moment for, I see Senator Little, Senator Klein, Senator Osmick. Good morning, Senator Klein. Members, do you have any, and while we're going through the hearing, if you wish to turn your cameras off, that's fine during the hearing. Just remember that when you are participating, you have to turn them back on. Members, do you have any questions regarding the procedure that we're going to follow during the course of this hearing? If you do, please indicate at this point. We'll try and recognize you. Okay, I don't see anyone with any questions. So with that, we will proceed with the bill. And at this point, I would ask that Senator Jasinski take over the chair of the bill, as I will be presenting the bill.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Senator Newman's Senate File 3255. Senator Newman.
Members, this bill I would characterize as a mini omnibus bill, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of a breakdown as to how we got here before I actually address the terms of the bill. And in this particular bill, there's a number of individual policy pieces that we have put together, and that was done with a very informal working group that we started with and put together. That working group consists of myself, Senator Dibble, and Senator Jasinski as the vice chair, and then our counterparts in the House. The four caucuses agreed for purposes of this bill that the criteria was that it would not contain fiscal issues, and that all four caucuses would agree as to which bills were going to go into the mini omnibus bill. So in other words, we are trying to have a non-controversial bill come forward at this point. The idea behind bringing this mini omnibus bill forward is to have a bill come out of transportation. If you remember, we passed an awful lot of bills off onto the floor. I hadn't really anticipated doing an omnibus bill, but given what has transpired in the last month or so, it would seem wise at this point to pass a bill off or out of the Transportation Committee that has the various bills that we think are good for the people in the state of Minnesota. So I think you will find that many of the bills or the items that are in this bill, we have already had hearings on. Some we have not. Some have been heard in the Senate or the House individually. But for the most part, I think that we have had both member and public input into the bill. Not a perfect situation, but we are trying to do the best that we can under the circumstances. So before I begin talking about the bill itself, Senator Dibble, do you want to chime in at at this point regarding how we got to where we are at today?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Newman. I concur with your characterization of how we compiled the bill. I think we put a number of proposals on the table. I think you solicited your caucus, I solicited mine for their ideas. Likewise in the House, Representative Torkelson and Representative Hornstein and Representative Tabke were a party to those discussions, as well as going out to their members to see what they would like to have included, what they might have questions about, and the like. And that's how we came up with this document. And so it's almost universally, at least among legislators, agreed to. I think some questions did come up on one piece. We'll have some conversation around the project selection stuff in a little bit here, but it's a combination of bills that have been kind of hanging around this session, and then some ideas that have come along since in light of the circumstances that we're in. So it's a pretty good bill, and it was a good process. So I thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Newman, I believe you'll have to move the A5 amendment. Is that correct at this point?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Dibble. And we have the A5 amendment. It is a DE amendment, and it is also an author's amendment. So I would offer that A5 amendment at this time.
Senator Newman offers the A5 amendment. We have to do a roll call on this, Senator Newman, or we just raise our hands, or what do we need to do procedurally?
Procedurally, an oral amendment or an oral vote.
Okay.
In the normal fashion, just ask members to unmute themselves. And when you call for the vote, both aye and nay, ask them to also visually indicate their vote.
Perfect. All right. Senator Newman offers the A5 amendment. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Everybody, looks like the amendment passes. The A5 amendment passes. Senator Newman, to your bill.
Mr. Chairman, members, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to ask Ms. Stengel to walk us through the bill and give us both just a real brief recap of what the individual sections are and the source of the bill. I mean, as to which senators have come forward with the bill themselves. I would indicate that there are two areas where I would ask Ms. Stengel to stop and allow Ms. Boyd to weigh in. One would be an explanation of the Draheim bill, which does have a fiscal impact that I'm going to ask that she explain at that time, and is the reason why, at least initially, we are going to the Finance Committee. Also, as of this morning, I was alerted to a potential fiscal impact of the project selection section, which I believe is section 24. When we get to that section, I would ask Ms. Boyd to weigh in, explain that to us, and then I would also at that point want to explain to the members a phone conversation that I had with Commissioner Anderson Kelleher at about 10 minutes after 10 this morning, just before we started. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if I could have Ms. Stengel walk us through the bill.
Ms. Stengel, go ahead. You're muted. Sorry, you got to unmute.
Sorry about that.
There
Thank
we
you,
go.
Mr. Chair and members. Off to a rough start here. So looking at the A5 amendment, I'll go briefly over each section, and if there are questions, I'm happy to stop and talk further. Section 1 is a Senator Rarick provision. This has to do with road authorities that are able to acquire a private road by user. There's one change here from how we saw this in committee, and that's starting on page 1, line 24. There's now an effective date in an application to make it clear that this applies starting August 1st, 2020 and going forward. So it doesn't apply to work that has been done before that. Section 2 is a Senator Newman provision, and this has to do with turnbacks, and you'll see a few of these provisions throughout, and this has to do with one in St. Paul and South St. Paul. Section 3 is a Senator Tomassoni bill. This is a technical correction for the Specialist Noah Pierce Bridge designation. Sections 4 through 6 don't have a House companion, but this is a MnDOT bill carried by Representative Elkins in the House, and this has to do with temporary permits when a person applies for a license plate but doesn't have it yet. So right now it's those yellow pieces of paper you tape in your back windshield. What sections 4 to 6 do is change how this process works, and instead you're issued something that looks a lot more like a license plate instead of the paper you tape into your window, and then the new permit is actually affixed to your vehicle in the same place that you would have a license plate. That takes us to section 7, and this is a Senator Marty provision, and this has to do with exchanging information after a collision. You'll see a change from committee on lines 420 to 422. Some additional language was stricken so that an individual is not required to show their driver's license to the other driver after the collision. They still do have to show their license to law enforcement officers. Sections 8, 9, and 10 are Senator Jasinski's school bus interim permit inspection provisions. Section 11 is a Senator Lang bill, and this has to do with the pilot vehicles for overwide and overlong vehicles. Section 12 and Section 13 are a Senator Draheim bill. If you'll remember, last year or the year before, the committee passed an autism spectrum or mental health identifier that can be placed on a driver's license. These two sections split it out, so there's a separate autism spectrum identifier and a separate mental health identifier. And I believe, Mr. Chair, I'll stop here for Ms. Boyd to weigh in.
Ms. Boyd.
Thank you. Section 12 and 13 have to do, as Ms. Stengel said, with the autism spectrum identifier on the license. So that will require some programming changes in the DVS driver record system. That's estimated to be about 4 weeks at $8,000 a week, so about $32,000 of programming cost, staff time, et cetera. And the fiscal note on that provision has indicated that that can be absorbed within the current budget for that system.
Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Sections 14 through 16 are Senator Franzen provisions, and these have to do with special transportation service providers. And those are service providers that provide transportation services for the elderly and disabled. This has to do with some record keeping functions, and then making sure that the driver is on the provider's active roster, and if not, they can lose their certification. Section 17 has to do with the Driver and Vehicle Systems Oversight Committee, and this is a Senator Newman provision. One of the members on this committee is the chair of the Governor's Blue Ribbon Council on IT. That committee is set to expire sometime early this summer. So what this provision will do is to say the chair of that council at the time of expiration will continue to serve on the Vehicle Registration Oversight Committee. Section 18 is another turnback provision related to the one we talked about earlier. Section 19 is a new provision that addresses an issue that has come up since the earlier driver's license expiration bill was passed. So essentially what this does is if your license expires the month following the month the emergency ends, your license is extended for 2 months. So perhaps that's best understood sort of by example. So let's say the emergency ends in May and your license expires in June. That means that you will have until the end of July to have your license renewed. Section 20 is a new provision that requires the Commissioner of Transportation, the Commissioner of DPS, and the Chair of the Metropolitan Council to report to the legislature on how they are spending all of the federal funds related to COVID that they receive. Section 21 is another turnback provision, and this one has to do with a highway in Stearns County. Section 22 is a new provision that requires school bus drivers to use their warning lights and stop arm signals when they're making any sort of delivery to students that includes food, schoolwork, supplies, and other items. Section 23 is a Senator Rude provision, and this has to do with Aitkin County. This allows them to put all of the road and bridge fund tax money into a single township account, unorganized township account, instead of keeping them segregated, and then able to use it throughout the county. Section 24 has to do with project selection processes, and this requires the Commissioner of Transportation to develop and implement project selection policies for a variety of programs, including the ones that you see in the list there. The Commissioner has to consult with relevant stakeholders, and the policies must be adopted by November 1st, 2021. And then you will see, if you look at the bill on 14.3, the policy that they adopt must include certain criteria. And then finally, by February 1st, 2022, the Commissioner must report back to the legislature on what they've adopted. And again, I'll pause because I think Ms. Boyd has some things to add here.
Ms. Boyd, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. This is newer language, so there's a fiscal note being completed on it right now. We don't have that available except for some information from MnDOT that this would require. Primarily, the cost would be in the form of staff time. Right now, they're approximating about 400 hours of staff time, so there will be a cost to that, but we don't have any more detail at this point. That will be available hopefully before we get to Finance Committee. So.
Okay, back to Ms. Stengel, or is that it?
Briefly, Mr. Chair, then there's the repealer, and these have provisions relating to Senator Lang's pilot vehicle and Senator Franzen's special transportation service providers. And that concludes the overview, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stengel. Back to you, Senator Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to address section 24, the project selection language. As I indicated earlier, shortly after 10 o'clock this morning, I did receive a phone call from Commissioner Anderson Kelleher, and we talked about this provision. And I had also, at about the same time, received an email from Ms. Boyd alerting me to the fact that there is this fiscal implication. I don't think anyone in our working group anticipated this having a fiscal note. But Commissioner Anderson Kelleher and I agreed that pending the receipt of the fiscal note, which I understand is now in the process of being prepared, that we would agree to leave the language in for now and send the bill on to the Finance Committee, because it is going to the Finance Committee anyhow, because of Senator Draheim's provision, and that we would take up that fiscal note then in finance. And that agreement, of course, is not binding on the committee, but it is a conversation that I did have with the commissioner, and she is in agreement to proceed to address the finance issue, or I should say the fiscal note issue, when it gets to finance. With that, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would stand for questions. I think that is a pretty good overview of the bill itself.
Thank you. Senator Dibble's hand is up first. Go ahead, Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So long as we're on section 24, I thought I would raise a couple of matters. One is members might have received, I just had my attention drawn to it, a letter from the Minnesota County Engineers Association, hoping that they can have some more conversation on the local roads and bridges, as well as safe routes to schools piece of it. So I just wanted to alert the chair, if he had seen that letter, as well as members, that the local units of government are interested in that element. There may be time to have that conversation on the way to Ways and Means. The other,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Senator Newman, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dibble, no, I have not seen the letter, but I certainly will take a look at it when it arrives. And I will visit with you about whatever's in that letter between here and the Finance Committee. Be happy to.
Great.
Senator Dibble.
Great, thanks. And then I had sent a memo that was the product of a conversation I had with MnDOT last night. And I think Mr. Rudin is going to testify in a minute about the bill and specifically about this section. But it would propose, it's the A6 and everyone should have been emailed it as this committee hearing began, and should be also posted. I think it's posted by now too. Maybe we should hold off on offering it until we hear from Mr. Rudin, but I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to it. It would propose simply to condition the project selection, new project selection policy to projects of a capital nature, because so it's not confused with operating dollars on operating grants. We're talking about projects, which are of course a capital proposition. So I thought I would mention that. Maybe we can hear from whatever your pleasure is, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we'll go to Mr. Rudin if you want to comment on that. Then we'll go back to Senator Newman with his comments. Mr. Rudin.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Rudin with MnDOT Government Affairs. And thanks for your consideration of the amendment. It was kind of our understanding that the language was, in fact, intended to apply to the capital program, the selection of capital projects. But there were a couple places in the language where maybe that wasn't perfectly clear. So the amendment that Senator Dibble is bringing forth would hopefully just make it crystal clear that, for certain programs where we might provide both capital grants as well as operating assistance, that the policy is intended only to apply to the capital portion of the program.
Senator Newman, before I think we officially offer the A6, do you have any comments to that? Senator Newman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I did receive the A6 amendment this morning. I have taken a look at it. And I will tell you that from my standpoint, I will not support the proposition of the A6. There is no misunderstanding in my mind that the purpose of the project selection process as outlined in section, was it 24? Yeah, section 24 is to include this transparency for all projects that MnDOT is involved in. I would draw your attention to a OLA report. It came out in 2019, and on page 24 of the report, the OLA specifically talked about project selection, and there are a number of different project selection processes that MnDOT goes through. Capital projects are one of them. Corridors of Commerce, of course, is one, the regular selection process. But there are other smaller selection processes that are also involved. And specifically, the OLA said that MnDOT's alternative project selection processes vary in their use of cost-effective criteria. In other words, there's an inconsistency in the way MnDOT approaches their project selection. So it is my understanding, and it is my desire, that MnDOT comply with the transparency of all project selection processes, not just Corridors of Commerce and the regular process, and not just capital, but all of them. And Commissioner Anderson Kelleher and I did have a brief conversation about that aspect of the fact that, if we move forward with more transparency. Perhaps we would eliminate the ongoing conversation where some of us, like myself, believe that constituent requests are very appropriate. Other senators feel that constituent requests should not be included, that MnDOT should be solely responsible. So what I'm trying to do is get us into a position where we have input from the public and transparency as to how MnDOT spends our money. And that is the whole purpose of Section 24. It is not just to address capital projects.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Senator Carlson, you're next. Senator Carlson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on, not just a concern on Section 22, which requires school bus drivers to use the, and I'm assuming that this is the what we call the 8 ways warning lights, and they must use it if they stop to drop off any food, schoolwork, supplies, and such. I've had some experience with this particular requirement in the past, and I know that it was very hard fought to even get a May to use the 8 ways in certain places. And I'm wondering if we have had input from the, I guess from the authority involved here, and it probably would be the State Patrol, whether they believe that this should be enforced, because that is that's something that requires the logging of, for instance, if somebody drives through a stop arm. That's a very serious situation, and they have 4 hours to report that, and it's a fairly large fine, and I believe it might even be a misdemeanor, which goes on criminal record. So I'm hoping that we've got the right kind of input to verify that. I do support it, but I know that it has been hard fought in the past.
Senator Newman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Carlson, this is a provision that candidly came to us quite late in the game. Senator Dibble brought it forward, as I understand it, as a request from Senator Kent. I think that she had maybe a constituent approach her on it, and I'm going to ask that she comment on it in a moment. But it did seem to be a very appropriate safety measure, and as was explained to me, under current law, if children are not on the bus, they can't display the flashing lights and they can't display the arm. However, in this COVID situation that we currently find ourselves in, school materials, food, etc., are being delivered to children, and they are approaching the bus. And it's creating a very unsafe situation for the children as they approach the bus. And we discussed it within our working group, and it seemed to us to be appropriate. We did run it by the School Bus Operators Association, and their government affairs individual, Scott McMahon, has gotten back to us and told us that they are in favor of it. But perhaps, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kent could address sort of the genesis of how this got to us.
You bet. Senator Kent, take it away.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski and Senator Newman. Yes, this was something that came from a constituent because our buses are operating differently these days than they usually do. Senator Newman did a good job of describing, but whereas it usually transports children to learn and to be able to have school lunch, now it's working in reverse. And the way the law is currently written, they can't employ those traffic measures unless there are children on board. And since families and children are coming to pick up their school supplies and their food at the bus stop, it seemed like a common sense provision to do in this circumstance, just to keep everybody safe. So I really appreciate Senator Dibble and Senator Newman taking a close look at this and working with all the stakeholders to come to what I think is a pretty good solution for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Senator Carlson, any follow-up question after that or not?
No question. Like I say, I support it, and I just wanted to make sure that the stakeholders were involved because, like I said, this was a hard-fought um, initiative that we had in the past to be able to use the 8 ways. So I'm very happy that that the stakeholders do agree.
Okay, thank you. Now down to North Mankato, Senator Frantz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and greetings, members and staff from beautiful North Mankato. Thanks to Senator Newman and Senator Dibble for putting this together. I did get a call from our county engineer, very concerned about Section 24. The points they wanted to make are well summarized in the letter that I think Mr. Kaluza has now posted to the committee page. They added that, there's often a cost share and that they're very pleased with the current system. So I wondered, Mr. Chair, whether we could have Mr. Radin clarify MnDOT's position on Section 24. I'm a little unclear whether they're okay with it just for the capital projects or whether there had been some discussion and they're okay all the way around. And I don't know if Mr. Radin wants to comment on that.
Mr. Radin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And the amendment that we were suggesting, I think would clarify what the amendment was intended to apply to, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that, we would be in support of the language even with the amendment. I think there are a few programs for which we might have concerns. The local bridge program would be one example that we work with cities and counties on. In that case, we don't really select projects. It's more of a waiting list, and a local bridge project gets put on the waiting list, and then as funding becomes available, we kind of work our way down the list. There are a few exceptions to that. For bridges damaged by a flood, for example, there would be an exception made, but that would be one example. Some of the other programs we already do have pretty robust selection criteria for that we work with stakeholders on. Some of them are actually identified in statute. And so in those cases, it might be more a process of, trying to do a better job of documenting the project selection process and trying to make that more evident to legislators.
Okay. Senator Dibble. You're still muted, Scott. There you go.
Maybe I was muted before or unmuted before. Anyways, thank you. So on the A6, I will not offer it at this point. I will request that we continue to have some conversation about this because I do believe that something like A6, if this language does proceed in some form or fashion going forward, would be important because projects are projects and operating is operating. They're different. You don't select operating. Maybe some operating if it's connected specifically to a confined project, but operating is things like I don't know, plowing roads or something like that. So I think the idea of the A6 is important, but maybe we need more conversation and we need to refine it. And additionally, to Mr. Radin's point, in defense of MnDOT and all of us, this is one of the ideas that is coming into the bill absent introduced legislation. And I'll just say, Mr. Chair, if you can indulge me for 1 second, and then we can maybe drop this matter and move on and agree to have some conversation as we're on the way to Ways and Means. And maybe Senator Newman was going to talk about this later, but I had a package of similar idea, or at least one similar idea in 2 different forms, and was trying to figure out how to merge Senator Newman's idea, which is Section 24, with my ideas. And what I was hoping to achieve is something we talked about as a committee last year, which is how we do the overall project selection program, not just for MnDOT, but thinking about how we solve mobility and transportation problems as they intersect with community values and economic development and, what people in a particular community need exactly. And, kind of taking a step back, this is what I refer to as the Virginia Smart Scale model, which several other states have picked up, and it's proven to both be a very, very cost-effective way to figure out transportation solutions, and delivers more bang for the buck in terms of benefiting people. But that was maybe a bridge too far. Senator Rarick has indicated some interest in that as well. So we're going to have some conversations over the interim on that piece.
Senator Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator Dibble. And yeah, this would be a good time, I think, for us to talk about the other part of Section 24. At one point, we were talking about putting in some project selection language into the bill and having or creating a legislative task force to address it further. And ultimately, what we decided is that rather than putting together a legislative task force, we would simply use our existing committee, both in the House and in the Senate, and have a sort of an informal joint committee process that we would hold hearings during the off season and explore this idea that Senator Dibble has with respect to what he calls the Virginia method or the Virginia process. I looked through it and it looked, frankly, it looked promising, and it does have transparency in it. It does have public input in it, and I think it's really worth looking at. And as we move forward, it would be my intention and Chair Hornstein's intention to hold some joint informal hearings on that. Anyone on our Senate committee that wishes to join in and participate is more than likely. We haven't even broached the subject with any members yet, but that is sort of the other part of Section 24, only we were just going to do it as a committee rather than forming a formal legislative task force, because I think that in the end, any kind of a recommendation out of a task force is going to land in our lap. We might as well do it ourselves, and I think we can do it just fine. I do appreciate the fact that Senator Dibble is willing to hold off on the A6 at this point, and I will absolutely spend more time talking to him. I also want to talk to our counterparts in the House about this and engage the commissioner. Our conversation this morning was really quite brief, but I certainly do want to talk more about the fact that we want to have some changes to the selection process. And I am talking about selection process. I'm not talking about operations. So I think Senator Dibble and I are in agreement on that. But I would request that we just leave it in for right now. And between now and finance, keep in mind this first goes to rules, then goes to finance. So we'll have a little bit of time in order to further refine Section 24 if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Senator Senjum, if you can unmute and talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just be brief. For some number of years, when Senator Dibble was chair, I would give the most annual "Where is the secret room?" speech, and how do these decisions get made? And I only bring that up because we were looking for transparency, and we were wondering about how these decisions get made, and we still are to some great degree. So, as one who probably won't be involved in this until it gets to the floor, I would just urge Mr. Chair, you and anyone else to, kind of stay for polish the edges if you have to, but keep that in mind that I think transparency in this area is important, no matter where you stand with respect to the political spectrum or where we go with respect to transportation selection process.
Thank you, Senator Senjum. And no one else has their hand up, so I have one question. And I think we got a confirmation of it. Section 6, as far as the temporary permit costs, My concern was that we're not putting any extra costs on the deputy registers for printing material or things like that. So I think we have a comment back that I got from David Frazier that Katie Knutson commented that there would be no cost, but I don't know if Mr. Rudin can comment on these permits and how they'll be done process-wise, or if you don't know. I just want to make sure that our deputy register is not experiencing any more costs for these new special temporary permits. Mr. Rudin, do you have any comments on that?
Unfortunately, I don't, Mr. Chair. That's something I'd need to verify with Department of Public Safety, but happy to do that and get you that information.
Okay, if you just follow up, and again, we got a comment back from Ms. Knutson that there was not. I just want to confirm how that's being done, who's supplying that material, and how the logistics of that's going to be done. So, thank you, Senator Dibble.
Thanks. So long as no one else's hand was up, I just wanted to raise a new subject because it's going to affect your constituents. And it's the section brought to us by Senator Franzen, that's section 19. And I think it was a constituent of hers who made the point that the driver's license expiration suspension during the peacetime emergency might be problematic for that individual whose driver's license doesn't expire during the emergency, but might expire the day after the emergency, for example. And then they would have to get that driver's license renewed that day with no grace period allowed to them, with the potential that there be a big backlog of folks trying to get their driver's license renewed right then, right after. So what this does is it allows for the same period of time for those whose driver's license expire the month after the peacetime emergency itself ends. And if you recall, what we've done is folks have until the end of the second month after the end of the peacetime emergency to get their driver's license renewed. If it expired during the emergency, now that has been kind of basically extended out off the tail end of the peacetime emergency. Did I explain that correctly, Ms. Stengel?
Ms. Stengel.
All right. All right.
You said yes. Thumbs up. We got a thumbs up.
Does everyone understand what I said? Was I clear?
Yes.
All right.
Senator Newman, any comments to that?
No comments other than I want to thank Senator for bringing that forward. It's frankly something I don't think anybody thought about until we began talking about it, and Senator Franzen brought it forward. So thank you for that. I think it is a good provision because we find somebody potentially that would get caught in no man's land, and I think that we have now hopefully fixed that problem.
Okay, thank you. Nobody else's hand is up. Any other further comments or questions on the bill? Seeing none, Senator Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, with that, I would move that Senate File 3255 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Finance Committee.
Senator Newman makes the motion to pass the bill as amended and refer to finance. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand, please.
Aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign, raise your hand and say nay. Seeing none, the bill passes and is re-referred to finance. Senator Newman, any final comments?
Thank you very much, members, for working with us on this. Not the perfect process, but I am hopeful that there is some provisions in the bill that we just passed that are going to be good for the people in the state of Minnesota. And I want just also bring to your attention that as Senator Dibble mentioned, there's going to be this task force, or actually
I did. What is
Senator Stenjum, can you mute your speaker, please?
multiple?
Or staff? There you go.
There we go. Anyone that wants to join in on that discussion that we're going to have, or we're going to begin in joint committee with the House, I would invite them to do so. I think it's going to be worthwhile. And other than that, we have this small working group that I've talked about. We have acknowledged that there are some other bills that have merit that we would like to bring forward, but they are somewhat more controversial. And just as an example, we've got a trooper bill with a potential raise and a report required for the troopers. We have a transit safety bill that is out there. Senator Howe is working on the trooper bill. Senator Hall is working on the transit bill. We have the driver's license testing bill that is still out there. And quite honestly, I think there is going to be a backlog once this emergency is lifted. And I think it'd be a good idea to talk about that bill some more. So with respect to those bills or any other bills that you think that we could maybe get done yet this year, please bring them to either Senator Dibble's attention or my attention, and we'll do the best that we can. That is the final comments, Mr. Chairman, that I have at this point. Unless members have any other questions or comments, I am done.
Senator Newman, actually, I'm going to give the gavel virtually back to you so you can follow up with the final comments.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Jasinski. Members, thanks again for all of your help on this. And please stay in touch with any ideas or requests that you may have as we move forward. Again, this is a process that I don't particularly, I'm not real fond of, I will confess. I would rather have more membership input and more input from the public. And as we move into the more controversial bills, I think that's going to be appropriate. Unless any members have any questions or comments that they wish to make at this point, I think our business is completed. I see no one with their hands up. And again, members, thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.